this bill was never said it was going to save money.
Right.
It's sort of you're going to a room and you're changing the furniture around.
Right.
But you're not really changing the room. Maybe the thing that's not being reported on is how many teachers are being let go. And so I worked at South Burlington, and last year I believe it was 40-some teachers that were let go for the budget. That's just to get it passed.
40 just in South Burlington?
In South Burlington. In Essex, I believe it was around 50. But if you're an independent school and you advertise that you only have class sizes of 12, you keep going, right? And there's no restrictions on numbers for you.
Right.
But if you're a public school and you have less than 18, then, well, maybe you should close.
Hello, Vermont. I'm Andy Julo.
And I'm Joanna Grossman.
And this is There's No Way in Creamy.
Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello, and welcome to There's No A in Creamy, episode 10.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Joanna's here.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Yeah, we're both here. And actually, we're not in the skate shack, are we?
No, we are not.
Where are we?
We are at WKRP in Cincinnati.
It really feels like that.
Yeah.
We're in the radio station studio at Media Factory.
Yeah, it's like an old-fashioned radio station.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I like it.
Yeah. We're in the process of migrating the podcast over here, at least for the winter. The interview was recorded in the skate shack, but this little segment we're doing here at the Media Factory is very cool. For those of you who haven't been down here, it's a really beautiful setup.
Yeah. It's a nice chair I'm sitting in. I like this too.
Yeah?
Yeah. I'm getting really cozy over here. I may nod off.
It's a good look, dude. It's a good look.
It is.
Yeah.
All right.
So we want to once again thank one of our sponsors, Phoenix Books. They have a really exciting event coming up. They're having Vermont author and activist Chuck Collins. He wrote a really cool book called Burned by Billionaires, and I got to interview him a little bit, and that's on the Phoenix channel.
Just watching a little bit of that in the truck before I came in here.
Yeah.
I thought it was great.
Yeah. It was short, but I'm super psyched. So he's doing an event at Phoenix on November 5th, and you can get tickets through them. But it was really cool to meet him, and he was very inspiring. He wanted to hear all about the Amazon fight.
Cool.
So we talked quite a bit a few weeks ago about how New Mexico had a really great initiative backfilling a lot of the federal cuts in their state. And I was excited to see that Vermont is taking action, especially on SNAP benefits.
Yeah, we have a little different way we go about it here in Vermont. They called a special session in New Mexico, and a lot of state legislatures are year-round sessions, so they don't have to do anything like this. But part-time legislatures have to come up with some way of handling these situations. And Vermont has the Emergency Board, which is comprised of the governor and the 4 chairs of the money boards for House and Senate. And they came together, and there were 2 plans. There was a House plan and the governor had a plan, but I think everybody wanted the same outcome. They quickly reconciled that, and we came out with additional funding for SNAP benefits for the short term.
Yeah. I've also seen so many community organizations starting to come together to see what they can do to support folks who might be food insecure. I know the Burlington School District is stepping up their measures and trying to make sure that all the families, school district families, are being fed. And that's been really, I mean, it's always like in times of crisis that you see people step up, and it's, you know, it's hard to watch, but inspiring to see the response.
Yeah, I know the Champlain Island food shelf was hit very hard the last day of the month. And one of the workers was saying they just never seen anything like this, just the uncertainty around the renewal and the November benefits. And so it was a crazy day for them.
Yeah.
But people are talking about it. People are trying to step up and help where they can. So hopefully this can be one of those come together type of things.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
So we have participated in a little piece of democracy over these past few weeks that was kind of fun and exciting and had some newness for each of us. So this time of year, the Democratic Party, but every political party by statute, the Democratic Party has their internal elections called a reorganization, and the town committees have to do their reorganization. That just means they elect their chair and vice chair and all those things. And they do that in September. And then part of what they do is choose delegates to send to the county committees. And then the county committees all just had our reorganizations in October. And we just did those. Andy was at his in the islands and also helped us out in Chittenden County. And I was, of course, at the Chittenden County one. That was my last day as chair of Chittenden County Democrats. And I was really honored to be elected to be one of the county's delegates to the state party. It was actually a very competitive election. And I feel really flattered and a little humbled that the party countywide, elected me. And it's actually an incredibly consequential seat because we're in the process of picking a new state chair. And I've already got state chair candidates calling me up. So we'll be covering that. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. This was all a mystery to me, even as recently as a year ago, how all this worked together, the counties, the towns, the state party. And I've gotten to know it well through you.
For better or worse.
Yes. I'm now a town chair.
That's
and
right.
I went to county reorg, and there were some new, fresh, younger faces there, which was great.
Awesome.
Same at Chittenden.
Yeah.
My daughter was elected to, what was it, second?
She's
What's the position?
Second vice chair.
Second vice chair. Okay.
We had lots of young people come in. I'm
really
super
nice.
Psyched about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
An enthusiastic second from the crowd for her nomination.
Yes. I shot my hand up in the air.
Yeah, I didn't know you could jump that high.
Yeah. Peter, who was, running reorg, and he got a real kick out of that. Yeah, but I was so excited.
But neither of us actively asked her to do it. She reached out to me and asked about it, and I referred her to you, and you referred her to Beth Esmond, who's now the chair of Chittenden County Dems.
Yes,
and it all,
wonderful.
and she's in and excited about it.
Yeah, we had so many new folks. So Natalie is the new second vice chair. She's in Colchester. We had Taylor Garner from Richmond come in, and he is the new town chair rep, which is a great role. And Krista Munier, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, Krista. He's our new county secretary. He's from South Burlington. And we had a few other young folks who are, maybe a little more in the background, but definitely getting involved. Some new town chairs, just so many people under 30 getting involved, which really made me happy.
Yeah, it's great to see the enthusiasm, people showing up. It was a rainy night. It was kind of standing room only in that auditorium too. And it was a hybrid meeting. So they could have stayed home and done it on Zoom.
And the auditorium was packed.
Yeah. No, people were standing around. In the back. So
they really were.
Yep.
Yeah. It was cool.
Definitely some enthusiasm there, and hopefully something that can be captured and pushed forward.
Yeah. I do feel like we might be seeing the beginning of generational change and power in the party, and I think that would be really good.
Yeah, it feels that way, and that would be a good thing.
Well, we had a really great guest, and we're gonna play that interview in a second. We had Krista Huling. Am I saying that right?
Yes, because it rhymes with schooling. This is the way she taught us to pronounce it. Yes. And she is the former chair of the State Board of Education. She's a longtime teacher. She's a parent, and she's got a new organization, the Friends of Vermont Public Education. Mm-hmm. And they have been active for the last year or so advocating for public schools and talking about the need for same dollars, same rules in respect to independent school districts. And we talked to her about that. And of course, we hit on her history and some of the parallels between Act 46, because she was at the helm of the State Board of Education when all these Act 46 mergers were happening, the parallels to today and Act 73, and where we're going with education as a state, because it's a big topic right now.
Yeah, she was so knowledgeable about the recent history of education here. It was really fun to talk with her.
Yeah. Not many people that understand Vermont education all that well. It is very complicated, but there are some people who know it really well, and Krista is one of them. Yeah.
Well, we really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to There's No A in Creamy, Krista Huling. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you remember, but so Krista and I met way back, not even Emerge Signature, but when we both did Emerge Boot Camp like a million years ago when Jill Kerwinski was still running it.
Yes, yeah.
And that was that... It was before the Holcomb campaign, right? And maybe you were just starting to get involved?
Just starting with the Holcomb campaign, yes.
Yeah.
So I was helping out Rebecca.
Yeah.
And so I joined that program.
Thanks for joining us. This is
you're
exciting.
And we were talking earlier, I don't know that we've formally
we
met.
did,
We had never like stood across from each other and shook hands. But I was the chair for the Act 46 study committee here in Grand Isle, and
so I'm sure we came across each other.
Well, I scoped the whole board out, and I think, I was at Spalding High School for one of the meetings, and I might have been your first one as chair, or you were.
So Act 46,
chair.
I started as chair maybe a year before those meetings started.
Okay,
so it was probably, I do remember the Barry meeting.
Yes. And then we presented our proposal at I think they call it the Black Box at the Lyndon Institute.
Oh, okay.
The theater.
Yes.
And you were nice enough to grant our proposal. We were a little short. We only had 3 towns that would be on board with it, and we needed 4. And you allowed us through the gate. I just remember that theater I'm sure it's great for performances, but it like vacuumed voices up. You could not
I remember
hear
that meeting.
people
Yes.
talking.
Oh,
They
man.
20 feet away from you, moving their lips, and no sound was reaching your ears. So I think you approved the proposal. We went off and held a vote, and we got it through. So I'm not really sure what anybody said that day.
Good. I don't remember exactly, but... But yeah, so the Act 46, I did meet a lot of people around the state,
Sure.
but didn't get to really talk to them one-on-one.
Yep.
But
And
that's cool. Did you travel? You traveled like all over for that?
I did. So we would, really all over the state, a different school every month. And then when it was Act 46, when it was go time, we were meeting sometimes 3 times a month. So all around the state. So I've been in a lot of school buildings, got a lot of tours, a lot of public comment, and a lot of different things with Act 46. Got some exposure to the whole state.
Well, we're like getting ahead of ourselves here. So
Okay.
you are a former
We do that.
State Board of Ed chair. Yeah,
Yes.
we do that. We get excited. We love our guests. So you were a former State Board of Ed chair. Now you're running a new organization, Friends of Vermont Public Education. Want to tell us a little about your background and a little about what that organization is? I guess they're 2 questions.
Yeah, and I'll go back even because I know the last episode you put out about Howard Dean.
Yes.
The whole reason I'm in Vermont is Howard Dean. So I graduated from UVM, and I was on a summer job in Maine, went backpacking through Europe, and people kept complaining, you live in bush country. And I was like, I'm going to go home and I'm going to do something about that. So my then boyfriend, now husband, we moved to Vermont. We showed up with a Subaru, sleeping bags, and that was it. And started volunteering for the Howard Dean campaign. And to pay for my Dean habit, I worked at Vermont Teddy Bear. So I was a teddy bear counselor by morning, and by afternoon, I was the finance intern. So I would go and collect all the checks and cash them and bring them to the post office. So that was my jam. So I did that.
Amazing.
And by the time that the campaign ended, my now husband, he had gotten a job at UVM in the lab. So we stayed. But that's how I got here.
spending your first night in Vermont in the back of a Subaru is probably the best introduction to the state you can have, right?
Yeah. And then we got an apartment, an old farmhouse in Charlotte, lived there for 3 years. So that was the sort of evolution. I thought I was going to be in politics. And after that, I decided I didn't want anything to do with politics.
Yeah.
So I better find out something else. I went into teaching. So I went back to school and became a teacher. And so I feel like through the years, I've intertwined between politics and teaching, kind of go back and forth. And maybe like a lot of people in politics, I kind of, every once in a while you need a break because it gets to be too much. And so I'd step away and be like, I'm never going to do politics again. And then all of a sudden you get pushed back in.
Right.
So when it comes to being on the state board, I was on the state board from 2013 to 2019. So I had my 6 years. And then kind of in and out of politics, I was in the Lamoille County Democrats. I was a delegate for the state of Vermont I'm trying to think, it was Obama's second presidency.
Oh, to the DNC?
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
I went down there. So I've just sort of been in and out with politics and then with education. And so when my time on the state board ended, I was definitely ready to take a break. So I've taken a little bit of break. I've done some more local things. But what was always one of the biggest troubles looking at education was the role of independent schools and how we have 2 systems in the state of Vermont. So we have a public school system and an independent school system, totally different rules. And really on my time on the state board, besides Act 46, we spent a lot of time working on why do we have this? And as we tried to make rules more equal, we got a lot of pushback from established politicians, from interest groups. And so it was always one of these things that just didn't, it's one of the biggest problems I think we have in the state is that we have two completely different systems that don't work together. And we have an agency that's not prepared to really lead either. Because they're so divided. And so last year, a group was getting together, Friends of Vermont Public Education. It was four former members of the Vermont School Board Association. They reached out to me to see if I would want to join them. And I said, yes. I mean, this is an issue I really care about, and I want to see more equity in the state. So I did. I joined them. And we have a new campaign. So we're trying to work on, this idea that if you take public money, you need to have the same rules. So same dollars, same rules.
So I think we've probably been having the same conversation in Vermont on education since Act 46 for sure, maybe further back, of what's the right balance between local control and local decision making and having enough scale to be efficient and effective for our students. That's a big conversation, and we're having it again here in Act 73. Why do you feel now is a time to also address this issue of public versus private? Why is now the right time?
And I guess maybe we want to back up a little bit too. With Act 46, we never really finished the conversation. We did Act 46, and then we never revisited it. We never what worked, what didn't work. I was surprised the legislature never called me in to talk about that. They called me in to talk about Act 98. Act 98 is what made the governor, who gets to pick the Secretary of Education instead of having a commissioner. But they never asked me to come in and talk about Act 46. And that was a lot of time and effort. And I think because we don't go back and look at what we've done, we're just well, things aren't going right, so we better do something else. And it's well, let's pause and let's look back. And I do think one of the problems with Act 46 is nothing was asked of districts that don't operate. And they were continuing to have choice. And so people, from around the state, gave up a lot of local control. And this other group was asked to give up nothing. And so that chasm got larger. And I think that's why the conversation is ripe right now.
So ethics complaints were filed against two key senators in advocating for 73 about their conflicting roles in private schools and public funding. Did you support those complaints? Do you have strong feelings about those?
Yeah, I did. Our whole organization did. So when you have, and this was interesting, when you have a committee that's put together to do a conference report, and 2 out of the 3 senators have direct ties to independent schools, it just shows how things are stacked against public schools. And public schools and public school advocates really felt that. So then when you see the conversation hijacked and really things introduced into the bills that was not in either version that have to do with independent schools, you just throw up the red flag. Something is not right here. This process broke down. It really created distrust in the public school community, and really need to call out these ethics and even people that put them there. Right? So there should be some real questioning. Who put those people in the room? Why are they there? And what are we going to do to have it differently so we have more public school voices around the table? Because independent schools, those really, and choice students are 5%, less than 5% of Vermont students. So it's way overrepresented at that conference committee. And I think it was even Martine, I was listening to one of your former episodes, talking about how Chittenden County, who has some of the most students, they weren't represented at all. So it's just an overrepresentation, and just the ethics behind, if you're being paid by a school and then you're going and advocating for you're advocating for things that are going to directly benefit that school, what is your role? And then because it's an independent school, there's no transparency to see, we don't know what the budgets are. We don't know what people's roles are because everything is behind closed doors. So that just, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like you have everybody advocating for all Vermont children. It really felt like it was for very few.
So along those lines, you just recently sent a letter to the Committee on Committees asking them to censure Senator Beck. What precipitated that action?
So some great reporting, actually. So by Lola DeFore and Ali Novak they were both reporting about how you have Beck was going behind closed doors and going into Cabot and into Danville and suggesting that they should close their schools early this year. So that way they can all have choice to go whatever school they want, and saying that there's going to be legislation coming up that if you close, then you have to designate to 3 public schools. And so scaring people. And you then, this is, Senator Beck, he's a senator. He is also on the redistricting task force, which is tasked with creating the map. It's not ethical to do that then when you're advocating for these schools to close that are right next to where you work. So it looked like a direct benefit. And so I know our organization, we do see our role as being watchdogs and just seeing how the process is unfolding and calling people out. And it's just, if you're going to be on the task force, you need to work and let the task force do its job. And then he also chose not to contact Twinfield, which is another small school right in that area. So it just, and this was also coming out with Lola DeFore's reporting about IEPs and how you have more students on IEPs in Danville than you do in St. Johnsbury. And St. Johnsbury only has about 8% of their students on IEPs, and then the rest of the state is around 20. And so are they taking all students? And I thought Lola DeFore, she actually had a great episode with Vermont Public, a roundtable, just talking about how the website was scrubbed about admission policy. Once she asked, then it was scrubbed. Those things don't build trust.
Right.
And these are lawmakers making big choices for around the state where it looks like they're just advocating for their employers and their backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the most harmful things that I found in Act 46 and otherwise is the notion of do X before the state does Y to you. And it's you're right, it's scare tactics, and I could say, I could probably guarantee you the state as a whole is probably not going to make you do something that is obviously harmful to your community or your students. So don't react. Find out what's best for your community and put that forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's like everybody wants what's best for their kids.
Yeah.
So if you're being told by a senator,
Right.
somebody on the redistricting task force, you better do this.
Right.
And you better do it now. Closing your school is a big deal.
Yep.
Right. And that's a bigger conversation about, I know that they have lower numbers and those are good conversations to have, but to force a vote. And then the vote that was it's being forced to vote because there was a petition. And the petition was put forward by another parent who works at St. J. And then there was even people that signed the petition are now saying they want their names taken off of it because they were given wrong information. That's no way to make a choice about closing a school.
Right.
That's not a deliberate, and it's really hard, I think, for these school boards especially. All these deadlines are for Montpelier. Yes. They do not work for schools. Right. Schools right now should be worrying about next year, and they're coming up with budgets. So to be throwing in this thing about are we closing, are we not closing, what are we doing? By having that conversation, they're actually not talking about what they should be doing and what's best for kids. So that's a conversation that shouldn't be happening right now.
Yeah. I mean, school boards are staffed by volunteers and parents and community members who don't have a tremendous amount of time, and they do need to be focused on controlling costs and doing the best they can for kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a distraction.
Yes.
And it's not okay. So our group is calling it out.
It's a distraction, a distortion of reality.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to hear school boards around most of my exposure is to legislators and school board members around Chittenden County and just seeing how they're wrestling with it. And I think something that's frustrated me a little bit is how uninformed they are about what is going on in the rest of the state. Like, we're in this together, like it or not. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of astonished just a few days ago to be talking to a legislator who felt like, oh, well, if we can close their schools and just open a community center. And I was like, but they don't want a community center. They want a school. And I just was kind of like, you should really talk to folks who are dealing with this in their communities. This is not hypothetical. This is real. And we haven't seen any data to show that it's going to save money.
So, if you're talking about looking at the bigger education policy, this bill was never said it was going to save money.
Right.
It's sort of, you're going to a room and you're changing the furniture around.
Right.
But you're not really changing the room, and you're changing governance. And when it comes to closing schools, as a parent, I have a 9-year-old. Do I want my 9-year-old on the bus for 45 minutes to an hour and a half? I mean, already in our small town, right, our small town of about 3,600, it's already a 35-minute bus ride. So what does that mean for these other towns? Like, just geographically, as a parent, I don't want my my 9-year-old on a bus for that long. And so I think when you're attacking somebody's school, you're also attacking their values about what do they want for their kids.
Yeah.
And so
there's nothing more personal to people than that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And community members really, they take pride in their schools, and they should. They do a lot of good work. And it's just to say you're too small, you should close. But I'm going to go back to the independent schools. So, but if you're an independent school and you advertise that you only have class sizes of 12, you keep going, right? And there's no restrictions on numbers for you.
Right.
But if you're a public school and you have less than 18, then, well, maybe you should close. So that's where the inconsistent message. So how can we say that we're going to support with public dollars schools that are advertising as being small, and that's okay, but then we can't do that for other students? And that doesn't feel right either. So that's when you're getting back to the equity and having that conversation. Why should we have schools close just to support other schools that are just as small or smaller and don't meet the same standards? I've listened to a lot of public comment around the state about how people feel. Like, we had those meetings when it was people were being forced into districts. And we would sometimes have 6 hours of public comment. So I've listened to a lot of Vermonters. Vermonters don't want their schools to close. Right. And I feel like we need to have honest conversation about, that is more expensive, but because we live in Vermont and we're rural and we value our kids, we should try to keep schools open. And maybe not for as long as they want through high school. But really, when you go look at the standards, up until 4th grade, you can do that in a one room. But after 4th grade, I would challenge anybody to look at the standards and really say that you can get that done in a small school. When you start having the science requirements, the English requirements, the math requirements, and then trying to do a grade range of 5, 6, it just becomes impossible. So I think the grand compromise in my mind would be that everybody's entitled up to grade 4. And then after that, you really need to start consolidating. There's an absence from any political party right now coming up with a better vision for Vermont. And what is it? It's not just economics. It's housing. It's childcare. I mean, I live in Cambridge. We are just under population size of Bristol, and we have no registered daycare. So we have no daycare. So when I decided to leave teaching after 20 years, I announced it. I had 2 former students in 1 week contact me and ask me if I'd be their nanny for their kids. And I was like, I'm really touched. I think that's sweet, but I want to know more. Why is there no daycare here? The only daycare is for our ski resort, which is not for people in town. There has to be a grander vision. We have all these buildings. They don't have to just be community centers. They can be daycare. They could be a commercial kitchen that's open to our local farmers. It could be so much more, but I think people also want it to be a school for at least that when those kids are really young and keeping them close to home. That is important, keeping your kids close to home.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the point is that these have to be family-centric and community-centric decisions. And if a community says, hey, we want to call it and close this building, that's one thing. But if that's not what they want and it's not going to save money, then honestly, why are we doing it?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the bigger question. And then it comes back to, is it just about governance? And is governance going to save us? And we're going to spend so much time in the next couple of years talking about governance. We're not talking about the kids. And the kids are not okay. I mean, I was just in the classroom until last year. The kids are not okay, right? We've just gone through COVID. We've had a lot of trauma experience. They need a lot of help. And people keep talking about the dwindling population. And yes, those are facts and numbers. But the amount of kids in trauma compared to what they were in the 80s or 90s, to teach in a classroom today, it is exhausting. It is so exhausting. There's so many needs with students, and we can't ignore that. And as an educator, you can't do your job if people can't attend to class. And one of the other, grander vision that we need is something about our health and human services. They are being delivered in school, but they're coming out of the ed fund.
Right.
So you want to reduce property taxes? Let's actually have the general fund pay for all the social services that are happening in schools. That right there would change the tax rate for everybody. It just needs to be a grander vision. We keep trying to, we love silos in the state of Vermont. We just need to stop them in government and really think about the bigger picture. And I'm not seeing a vision from Scott. I'm not seeing a vision from the Democrats. And we really need a leader to step forward that can look at the big picture and not put everything in silos.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught our episode with Jay Nichols, but we were talking about that
I did.
too. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
know that school budgets have gone up, but we don't know that education spending has gone up. We've reclassified a lot of
Right.
things that were in the general fund into the education fund, and we really haven't parsed it out. And we know teachers aren't getting rich.
No.
and kids aren't doing well.
And the insurance, people always love talking about teachers' insurance. Insurance has gotten worse.
Yes.
That's why we ended up in my family, we looked at the plans. My husband is not a teacher and had a much better plan. So it's like, well, if that's not helping us and it's really stressful being in the why am I doing this? Right? And you have to start thinking about it. So, it's a lot of, and that's the insurance piece. Everybody wants to cut everything, but if insurance is going up 20% every year for teachers, if you have a school budget, you have to cut 20% somewhere.
Yes.
And so maybe the thing that's not being reported on is how many teachers are being let go. And so I worked at South Burlington, and last year I believe it was 40-some teachers that were let go for the budget. That's just to get it passed.
40 just in South Burlington?
In South Burlington. In Essex, I believe it was around 50. So when I was looking at making a decision, do I want to go back or not? I started looking at what had been gutted. And I said, I don't think this job would be possible with the amount of kids that are in trauma that I'm being asked to deal with. And then you get rid of all these programs that are supposed to be helping kids. And so that's just to make the budget work. And that's because when you have a 20% increase, 80% of a school budget is all about personnel, because schools are buildings and people. That's it. It's not like there's not a lot of extra. So when you are getting rid of things, you have to get rid of people. And what does that mean for students?
And I think we conclusively proved in the pandemic that children need to be interfacing with people, not screens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and another thing
relationships.
Exactly. Another thing Jay said during that interview was that we are hearing a lot about what adults want, and maybe not so much about what kids need.
What kids need.
Yep.
That's exactly. It's just that, and this bill does nothing to address that.
Right.
It doesn't. And I know, people can defend it. It went through. It's going to create more equitable funding. That's fine. But you're missing sort of the secret of the sauce. Teaching is not a science. It's an art. And it takes people connecting with children to try to get things across. And they need to help kids and help them get what they need. And so it's just as you're cutting and you're putting more. I've talked to former coworkers, and class loads now are 50 plus kids if you have 2 teachers in the room. So it's 30 kids. And these are supposed to be South Burlington, it's supposed to be at scale, right? And things aren't going well. So is that what our model is for the whole state? If that's the model, that's not going to work. And then I think it's interesting. One of the things our group looks at is what are the rules that independent schools have to follow opposed to public schools. This July, there was a new rule went into place, the Education Quality Standards, which you probably know. So Education Quality Standards outlines, it's a document by the State Board of Education, what a student in the state of Vermont is entitled to in education and what the graduation requirements are and what should be happening. Those are actually not. They don't need to. If you're an independent school, you don't need to follow those rules. But if you're a public school, you do. And in these rules, it talks about curriculum. It even has an interesting class size. It's saying class sizes K through 3 should not be more than 20. But then you have the Scott administration coming through and saying class sizes minimum should be 25. And so that's the politician versus educators. And so it's a mismatch. So again, the Education Quality Standards is a great document to go look at and see what is required for the state of Vermont when it comes to public schools. And everything you read in that document is not required by an independent school. They're not required to follow it. Not required when it comes to non-discrimination, not required when it comes to school leadership, not required when it talks about teachers and having teachers analyze bias. All of those things are not. So if we're having public dollars pay for public schools and we feel really like that 95% of our students should follow this, why should the other 5% not? And if it's so rigorous and too hard to do, then that's a bigger conversation because public schools have to do it. And so I'm sure public schools would love a little like, okay, if the curriculum is here, but do we have more wiggle room? So that's the conversation is why do we have 2 separate systems?
You said you'd listened to the Howard Dean episode that we did earlier, and I don't I don't mean to continue to reference our own podcast. That sounds arrogant, doesn't it?
Sounds like an advertisement. I don't know.
We did ask him about the practicality of having two separate sets of rules and whether it could be sustained. And he felt that we're too far down the line. We can't go back. In your opinion,
I disagree. And I might have come to the state because of Dean, but there's a lot of things I disagree with Dean now that I'm older and I've gotten a little wiser. So I disagree. And I thought, though, I'm trying to remember because the way the question was asked, it was something about, it's not that these independent schools need to go away. Right. I think that was kind of the way he was saying, in that answer back and forth. Independent schools have a role in our state. Yeah. And all our group is saying and advocates are saying is just follow the same rules. And if you can't do that, why can't you do that? And then that's a bigger conversation about if there's too many rules because it makes it so it's not, you can't make your model work, then that's affecting the 95% of students that are following the rules. So maybe it's a bigger conversation. So one of the sticking points for me really, though, is admission policy. If you're going to take public dollars, you really need to admit anybody, right? You can't pick and choose about who you take because that's what then makes it harder for, say, a Danville, which gets all the kids that are more expensive to educate. And then you can just cherry pick the kids that you want. That's not right. So if you're going to take public dollars, take all the kids. And that's fine. Thetford Academy does that. They have with Thetford, they have an agreement. They take everybody from Thetford. And so that's the model of an independent school that is working for the community. It's taking everybody. So independent schools, they didn't even get the independent school status until they actually under Dean in the 90s. So it is for 100 years before that, there was a different model. And so let's go back and get rid of that special status and just say, if you take public dollars, you follow our public rules. And if it's too hard, have the conversation with us. I know it's a bigger conversation they talk right now because if you're in a public school, you have to have licensed teachers. Independent schools do not. So they do not have to have licensed teachers. And if they say the process is too hard, then let's look at that for all teachers. Let's look at that. If we care about it so much to do it for these other 95% of the kids, why don't we care for those 5%?
There's plenty of precedent, like for, if organizations get public grants to have some requirements that go along with those.
Yes.
It's not unlike that at all.
So right now, the only thing is the 2200 rule series. And this is a rule series through the State Board of Education. And it's very lax. And anytime, so when I was on the state board and we were trying to open up those rules and envision them, we got, so we're trying to make them more stringent, kind of things we're talking about right now, making them more like the public system. And I got pulled in by Phil Baruth and told, don't do this, or we're gonna, make a bill for the state board to go away. And he and Campion both put a bill forward to get rid of the state board. And so then they took over the rules in a study committee over the summer, right? So when the state board's trying to do its job, it's feeling the political pressure. And I think especially, so going back to that Act 98, which this was, I think, back in like 2012, it might even be, when the governor then was able to appoint a secretary instead of having the state board come up with a commissioner of education. It's really politicized education now.
Yeah.
And so we used to have more insulation between politics and education, and that's gone. And we're seeing a real deficit because of that. And instead of having conversations about kids and what's best for them, it's really about political points, your tax dollars. It's reversed that. And I think one of the most important things that could happen is that the legislature look back at 98 and think about going back to a system that have a state board that is then picking a leader. And they can really think about education and not about politics.
Yeah, you raised something that on the political end of it has been a real struggle for me as I work with, grassroots organizers across the state who are generally Democrats, and are struggling to keep that politicization off of their school boards. And yes, we're seeing this modeled from the top down, and it's like encouraging all kinds of extreme behaviors and candidates to show up for community school boards that really may not be representing their communities. So it's really important.
And I would say even being for public ed actually doesn't mean you're a Dem. a progressive or a Republican.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And that's been the interesting thing is really, I think education makes interesting bedfellows because it's not about if you have a D, a P, or an R next to your name. For me, it's like, are you for public ed? Are you trying to protect private or are you trying to protect private school interest? So it's not about party, which is interesting. And I don't think if you're sitting in Chittenden County and you're like, I vote for all Democrats and progressives, they might not be doing the work you think they're doing around education.
Yep.
Right. And so I think that's the important part is to really look at how your representatives are voting, not the party next to their name, because that doesn't mean anything in education.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, who are the legislators that you're working with and are supporting you in this effort?
So great. So the Friends of Vermont Public Education, we have a coalition going, same dollars, same rules. And so right now we have some other organizations that are partners. So with the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Principals Association, the School Boards Association, and the NEA. And so we're regularly meeting and talking about how we're going to push forward. Right now, it's really about educating people that there is even a difference. I mean, Toyna, to your point, they were saying in Chittenden County, people maybe don't know that there's a voucher system in the state of Vermont.
Yeah, that's right.
And people love to be like, oh, Vermont doesn't have vouchers. We sure do. Right? We have schools that don't, or districts that don't operate. They give a voucher to decide where they want to go and where they want to spend their money. So first of it is just educating people. We have a petition going. So we're asking petition. We're also collecting stories. So we want stories of people that have maybe been affected by this. Maybe if they wanted to go to a certain school or they were denied. So if they were if they felt like because of who they were and their identity and they weren't allowed at a school to come forward with those stories. So we're collecting those. Partners that we naturally see are people like Rebecca Holcomb, Martine Gulick. So people that we are reaching out to and having conversations with. I think they are a little busy right now with the redistricting commission. So we're a work in progress and we'd love additional people to come forward and be partners with us too.
Maybe we could just talk about Act 73, just your impressions on it in general. What did they get right? What did they get wrong in your opinion?
They didn't look at the kids, right? They just looked at tax dollars. One of the things I think they really got wrong was class sizes. And that started out the gate with Scott coming out saying they should a minimum be 25. I want politicians to go into a classroom that is 25, 30 kids. Just see what that feels like, what that looks like. If anybody's been in the classroom, they would not even fathom that. And not in our modern day of teaching. People might go, well, back when I was in school, we had 35 kids and we sat in rows. That's not what we do anymore. We don't sit in rows. We don't memorize, right? We engage, we learn, we activate, we try to get people to be critical thinkers.
There's also just more challenges for students. I was stunned when I came into the classroom a few times when my kiddo was little. There's so many dysregulated kids. There's just, you can't do what we did when we were kids.
Right. And I think people have that model in their head. So when they're like, oh, minimum of 25, and that's what, the number crunchers in Massachusetts said will work for Vermont. It's not going to work for Vermont. It's just not. So I think that was the biggest mistake was those numbers, and they're just not realistic. And then it becomes a numbers game, and then it pits rural versus urban, right? And so you have these, and I think, that was one of the problems with the bill in general. They're saying K through 3 should be no more than 20. And then you have Scott coming out the gate saying 25 minimum. You can see the difference right there. And the settling on 18 is just arbitrary. And it doesn't work if you have a school board and you're saying they're like, well, we have 40 kids. And so, but then what if you have 35 kids? Do you have one class? Do you have two classes? So it just becomes, these are kids. They're not just numbers. And you really have to, as a school board, they do the hard work of looking at that and seeing what is best for these kids. So I think that was number one that they got wrong. The lack of flexibility for school boards to do the right thing, and just mandating numbers isn't going to solve problems. And I guess my biggest problem with the bill is it offers no vision. There's no there. It's just numbers and moving stuff around, and it doesn't even save money. And it's going to create these bigger districts. But I look at the district that just got proposed, and me sitting in Cambridge looking at this district that then's supposed to go over to Stowe, which, by the way, is closed off for most of the school year because there's a mountain in between. and then all the way to Hardwick, which is an hour plus away. And then it's just like, so there's this huge, vast geographic area, and just because it meets a number criteria. I think one of the things that worked with Act 46 was when communities came together and they figured out the solution and came forward. I think this top-down state approach does not work. No one wants to force marriage. And then you're spending your whole time fighting it, trying to make it work. Every time Montpelier creates these bills, it's always on Montpelier time. And that's another thing. It does not come and track what actually happens in schools. And so instead of saying, well, in January, what? So things need to happen that actually make sense for creating school budgets for schools. So that's another thing they got wrong yet again. I remember once having a dinner with a politician right after the session ended. This is a couple of years ago now. And they're like, oh, we just did this bill and it's going to start next September. And I'm like, you're cute. You really think you passed something in Montpelier in the spring and then it's going to happen in the schools next year? The budget for next year was made a year ago. And I do think the things that worked about 46 was when people came to us and like, hey, we came up with a solution. And if you were giving your example, there's 3 towns, not 4. Go for it, right? You came up with a solution. There's a lot of geography challenges up here on the island. There might not be another dancing partner.
It's a really diverse state when you get down to the geography. We touched
really
Georgia here, but if you look out the window, you can see the problem with that.
Right.
It's an hour drive around the lake to get to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a local, you can see those challenges and you know where your community naturally tends to.
Yeah.
So I think that's where things went wrong too, is a state. I know people love, you had a whole episode of people supporting this bill. And they're saying the funding is great. Funding, you could do that, but this is more than just a funding bill.
Right.
This is fundamentally changing the governance. And to what end?
And you having been around the state, I wonder if you feel kind of the same thing that I'm coming to, is that, the top-down solution or a funding formula that's coming centralized out of Montpelier is so antithetical to the way we've structured everything in Vermont, that we have structured everything at the town level. And people still, even with these Act 46 mergers, people still talk about our kids. And our kids are not the 3 towns that have merged. They're the kids in our town. We talk about gold towns, and we're in these union districts, and people have to still break it down by town.
Well, and there's another issue that hasn't even come up yet, is the fact that the AOE, the Agency of Education, is not prepared to lead. They don't have the resources. It's a shell of what it used to be, and they don't have the leadership. So we're trying to create this bigger model, but part of the problem is we have an agency that's not functioning. So when we have 52 different supervisory unions with 52 different curriculums and 52 different curriculum coordinators, so that's all around the state. It's all different. I loved when Jay Nichols was talking about this, because some of our most vulnerable students move the most. And they're the most vulnerable. Say, go to school district, different SUs, and with it is different expectations curriculum-wise. But we can't even give that to the AOE. They don't have the capacity. And one of the things that you were talking really about federal cuts and the idea that how much of our agency is funded by the federal government.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we could tighten the ship about exactly what does an SU do. Right? Who is in charge of transportation? Who is in charge of curriculum? And is that curriculum being created? And the agency isn't holding schools and SUs accountable. And it's because they're not strong enough right now. So anything that we do with a weak AOE, I don't see the success there, unfortunately. And that's why we need something different. I know, and this may be a different episode for you all, but I know on the redistricting task force, they're really talking about these BOCES, this idea of these larger units, but having very specific things that they're looking at.
Right.
And that's where you get the savings. So I think that would be interesting to explore that more, just because the AOE is not prepared to lead. And I don't know how you get the AOE. I mean, I watched it be gutted. I had a front row seat. And you continually have a governor that's choosing weak candidates to be the secretary. When I was chairing and we had to go through an interview, I chose on the interview committee, I had the most conservative to the most liberal on the group. There were 4 of us. We had a good mix and we all agreed, right? Like if you can have that political mix, agree. And I'm still sad for the state that there was a candidate that was amazing that was not chosen. And I just think about like, what would our state be like if we had that strong leader? And, but that's the difference between a state board choosing a commissioner and somebody choosing for political reasons.
Well, and the checks and balances that are in place aren't functioning, right? The Senate was the oversight, and they just, approved her. And I think
they didn't. And then
no, they didn't, and then they did.
And
That's
then they
exactly
did.
Right. Yeah,
and they tried.
Yeah.
And so I think the bigger issue is with public education. You need somebody at the top. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat that actually has a vision and that wants to see kids come first and not tax dollars. But one fun, I did go, one of the, maybe you can relate as a new parent, I had no idea what I was agreeing to, but I was pregnant and I was asked to go to Iceland to this big conference. And the whole idea was looking at equity around these different education systems. And Scotland was there, and they were like, yeah, we're thinking about a lot more local control. And so the Vermont delegation comes forward, and we talk about local control, and they look at us like, we don't want that local control. That's too much. And so it was interesting getting that feedback from other educational systems. But there's always this push-pull me between local control and more oversight. And what could happen if we had one system that we put all of our money in it? And independent schools have a role in that. And that's fine. There are these, especially historical academies, that serve areas that there are no public schools. But if you're the de facto public school, then follow the rules. So everybody's the same.
Thanks so much for that, Krista.
Yeah.
So, Krista, we have a tradition on There's No Way in Creamy that we need to know what your creamy order is. So what kind of creamy do you order?
I love a good maple creamy, but it has to be like, so I'm a little bit of a snob with that. There's one in particular I really like, Palmer's in Jericho.
Yeah.
It's just classic. Like it's real Vermont dairy. It is the maple, local maple. It's the best. And for a while, my dad was going through cancer treatments, and that was always his post-chemo. Was going at the maple creamy. That was our little tradition. So we would drive by, get our creamy. And so that place just has a special place in my heart. So if I'm going to go get creamy, it's my dad passed, but it's I can go get my creamy with my dad. That's my order.
That's
Palmer's.
amazing. And sprinkles, crunchies?
No,
Straight
just
up.
straight maple. Love
Another
a
one
classic.
for Team Andy.
Yep. Oh, is that your order? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a classic.
I'm representing the no sprinkles.
That's right.
Or crunchies.
Yeah.
Not that I don't like them. I just like to enjoy the purity of the creamy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Respect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
for
you for
having
being
me.
here.
Yeah, thanks.
Amazing. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Thank you all for listening.
Follow us between episodes for the latest updates on our socials at There's No A in Creamy on Instagram, Substack, and Blue Sky.
And catch us on our next episode of There's No A in Creamy, Vermont Politics, Culture, and Beyond in Apple Podcasts and Spotify.